Hi and welcome to another Unity 5 tutorial. Today I'm going to look at networking and we're going to use all of the basic networking constructs that are already in Unity, so it's really easy to do. So first of all, we're going to create a ground plane. So I'm going to create a 3D quad. So I've already created a new project and set it to 3D mode. Let's rotate this quad 90 so it's nice and flat, and then we can make it as big as we want. So this is just the ground. We're going to make a car game. It's nice and big, and we'll also then drag on a texture onto it. That, and set the tiling on the surface to give us a bit more definition in that texture. Okay, so now we have something like this. Right, now I probably want to set the camera to be looking at that same view. So we will just select the camera, game object, align with view. So we're looking at the same thing. And now we're going to bring our object in. So our character, our player character, which is this little orange car, and we'll just drop it there. Now onto this little car we're going to add in a rigid body, physics rigid body, and that will mean if we then play and drop it, it should fall onto the surface. Great. This little car is free in the asset store. I just downloaded it from here. So if you type in cartoon car, you can get a free one thanks to Do Labs. Thanks for that. And what we're going to do is put on a drive script so we can drive this around on the surface. So the drive script I'm going to use is an adaptation from what you can find in the Unity manual online. If you do a search for get access, it will bring up the code for this, and I've made a few slight modifications. So we're going to go into the project and create a new C# script, and we'll call it drive. Let's open that up in an editor, and I've already got my code from before, so I'm just going to paste it in here and go through it for you. So this is the code straight out of the Unity scripting manuals online, with one exception. I've added a cross-platform input here at the top, which means this code will work with the mobile thumbstick controller in the cross-platform tools. So type this code in. You'll see that there's a simple update function. The cross-platform input manager is used here and here to get the vertical and horizontal axes, which are then translated for our speed and rotation. And then we're multiplying that by delta time in our update function. Okay, you might want to pause the screen at this point if you're typing in this code. So I'll just save that now and just switch back to Unity. Now you're going to get this error down this bottom here if we have a look. Namespace, Unity standard assets could not be found. That's because we're trying to use that cross-platform input controller and we haven't put that in yet. So to get hold of that, it's assets, import package, cross-platform input. Just bring that in. There's a whole lot of stuff. Might as well bring the whole lot in. Later on, when you're looking for the thumbstick controller, you'll find it in standard assets, cross-platform input, and in prefabs, and you can see all those controllers there. We're not covering them in this tutorial, but if you want to convert this particular game scenario for mobile, it will translate straight across. Right, so now we've got our little car up here and we created our script called drive. We're going to take this script and put it onto our car. Now, if everything else works and we press play, we should be able to drive the car around with the arrow keys. All we're doing is translating and rotating the object. With the car selected in the hierarchy, we're now going to add our networking components. So in the inspector, click on Add Component and find the networking, which is just here. If you can't see that, let me just close a few of these. Okay, let's try again. Networks. Network. We're going to add a network identity for our vehicle, and we're also going to give it local player authority. This will allow each instance of this game to have control over its player, which is what you want. And then we're going to add another network component, which is the network transform. This network transform sends the coordinates of our vehicle around the network, so to the server and then back out to all of the other clients that are connected to it. Now, we're not using anything to do with rigid bodies with this car because we're just translating and rotating it. So we're going to set this transform sync mode to sync transform. Okay, and we don't need to modify any of these other settings at this time. So let's just leave that and go back over to the hierarchy, and we're going to add our server and our setup components. So let's create an empty game object, and we'll call that Network Manager. Now this is an empty object which will just have networking components on it. So in the inspector, go to Network, and we're going to add a Network Manager. And then we're going to add a network HUD, which is here. Now, when we run, this is going to bring up our control. Really simple GUI controls for networking. You can create your own if you want. This tutorial does not cover that. Now, see when we run this, if we go into this game mode here, you can see that we've got options for setting up a LAN and hosting it, or connecting to a LAN as a client, and a few others. So we're just going to be covering these first two today. Let me stop playing. You'll also notice that the car disappeared. That's because the networking code itself can spawn the car and spawn all of the other players, which is what we want. So this car, which is a prefab down here in our assets, if you haven't got that, you might want to make it into a prefab. And with all of the networking objects attached, make sure that you apply it so that our prefab down here gets updated with all of these networking components. We can now delete this car altogether. And now if we go back to this network manager and have a look over in this spawn info, it's going to spawn a game object for us. So we grab hold of the prefab that we want spawned as our player, and we add that here. So that when we run this game, and we're going to host it at the moment, which means it runs as a client and the server, it will spawn our networked object. Now there's no other clients connected at the moment, so we can't see if it's working in that respect. So we need to stop running this and build out another version. To build and run this, select File and Build Settings from the menu, and you may want to go to the player settings and just ensure that you don't have the full screen as a default turned on. Okay, so make sure that's off because we want a window to come up so we can switch back and forward between the editor and also the window. Okay, so let's just build and run that. Saving it to the desktop, I'm going to call it Cars, which will replace the one I've already built. Now, once this is built, we'll be able to play the game in two places. So if we just go play, here's the second version starting up. Okay, and we just switch back to here and press run. We will use this version as the server. It actually doesn't matter which one it is. Okay, so here's our server side car. And if we go back to this window here and we click on client to connect, we now have our client car. Now, if I use the arrow keys at this point, just have a look what's happening. The keys are actually driving both cars. And if you switch back to the server side and drive, they're driving both cars as well. That's because that drive code is on both of these game objects. So if I just stop this, quit it, we need to get, actually, I'll just show you that again. Let me run this again for you. So we'll put this one on the server. There's our player car. Just move it out of the road. So when this one spawns, it doesn't spawn on top of it. And then here's this one, both being driven by the same keys. If we switch back to the editor, we can see both of those cars in the scene. This is while it's still running. And if we have a look at them, you'll see that they both have the drive script. And therefore, when you use those arrow keys or any of the cross-platform input devices, it's going to run this code. So to get rid of that, we need to make sure we turn that script off on all the objects that aren't our player, aren't our actual player. Okay, so let's just stop that client, quit there and stop that. And we'll just have a look down here at our car. It's probably easier to turn on the drive script for our car than it is to turn off the drive script for anybody who's connected. So let's start by having this drive script turned off. Right, what we'll do now is create another script that's going to control whether this drive script is turned on or not. So over the project, and we're going to go create a new C# file, and let's call this setup local player. And we'll open that up. Now, the code for this is all going to happen inside of the start function. So we're going to get rid of our update because we don't need that. And the next thing we need to add in is our Unity networking using Unity engine networking. Right, instead of using mono behavior, we're going to use a network behavior class like that. Now this will need this library, so you need to include that. And then inside the start function, we're going to look for the drive component and set it to be true if this is the local player. So this is local player variable is coming from this network behavior. Okay, so it knows whether you're the local player or not. If you're the local player, then turn on the drive script. Otherwise, for all of the other vehicles that are in the scene, in your instance of the scene, don't enable that. So you won't be able to drive them with the arrow keys. So if we just save this, Control S that, and then we're going to add this setup local player onto our car. Prefab. Drive should be turned off at this point, and then when we run this, just to check that it does turn it on and create it. Okay, drive is now turned on, and we can check that by selecting our car that is in the scene and having a look over here, and drive is indeed turned on. Right, so if we build this out now, we can just go build and run. When the client connects to the server, it shouldn't be able to drive unless it is, what's the word? In focus. Yeah, so let's run the server again from here. So there's our server side car. Apologies for the traffic going past if you can hear it. And then we'll add our client. Here's our client car driving. Yep, it does not affect the other car, but if we switch back to here and drive, you can't see that that car is moving in here unless I switch back to this window, but you can there. Okay, so that is basic networking with all of those Unity components, and that is a lot easier than it used to be. Okay, so let's stop that. Right, so next we'll move on to adding a name onto our player. So the first thing we're going to do is grab hold of our car prefab and bring a copy of it into the scene so we can modify it from here. What I'm going to do is create a 3D text that sits above this, which will have our player name. So we'll go into here and go to 3D object and create, where is it, 3D text. Great. I had the car selected, so it actually added it to the car. And we're going to just rename this to name, player name. And to align it on the car, if we position it at 000, which it is, good. So if we hit the W key, I can just move this up. And we can just, it's probably all right where it was before. Let's just ensure the anchor position is the middle center and that our text alignment is going to be in the center. And up here, we'll just type in player and just realign this above the car. 3D text is always tricky to align. Okay, I think it looks not too bad. This is just for demonstration purposes. All right, so wherever our car goes now, the text will go with it, and we should just apply that to make sure that the prefab back in our assets gets updated. So if we delete that player and run this and just start up the server, you'll see that we have some text. Now, to make the text look a little bit more elegant, if we have a look at the moment, it's sort of stuck in a particular position. It can turn backwards, it can turn to the side, and you can't read it. If we turn this into a billboard that always faces the camera, then it'll be easier for us to read the text on it. So we will create another script. Let's call that face camera. And open that up. Got some code from before that I'll paste in here for you. All it does is to take any object this is attached to and forces it to always look at the camera. Now the text is already rotated in an odd direction, so you need to then, after you've made it look at the camera, then rotate it by 180 degrees around the y-axis, so that it is indeed facing the correct direction for reading. So let's just save that and go back to our free car. And the name is what needs to face the camera, not the car. So if we attach this face camera script onto that text and then we run it. Now remember, to see a car, we actually need to create a server. Now when we drive around, our name is stuck on the car, but it's also always facing the camera. To change the name of the player, we're going to add a very simple GUI to the screen, and we'll do this inside the setup local player script that we created before. So let's open that and have a look. I've already added this code, and this is what you'll need to add. So up the top, we're going to add a string called pname, which is equal to the current or default name of the player, in this case player. Then there's an onGUI function. So we're using the old legacy GUI function, which is still inside Unity 5. It's quite efficient and it works well, and it's really quick to knock up a text field. So we're creating this GUI text field and sitting it down the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And we're putting whatever someone types into it into our pname variable. Now, once this has been typed into, we're going to assign it to the text that is above the little car using the update function. Again, we're going to check if we've got the local player because we don't want to update this on everybody, just the player. And we're going to then set that text mesh component that's attached to the car, which is that 3D text. We're going to set the text of that to pname. And then this bracket here is the end of our class. Okay, so if we just save that and go back to Unity and run it, you'll notice that that GUI doesn't come up in the bottom corner yet because we haven't created the car. We haven't created our player, and it's the player that setup local player script is attached to. So as soon as we go create the LAN, create the server and the first player, you can see that we've got a text box down here. Now, you can pretty this up and you put a label in front of it and whatever you like. But what I wanted to show you is if we type in here, we now can change the name above our player. So the next thing we need to do is to make this name propagate around the network. But just before we do that, you need to go back into our setup local player and make sure that you add this if statement inside your onGUI. Otherwise, you'll get like a multiple onGUIs running for every single client that is connected, and you only want it to run for the local player. So put that in first and then save that. Now, to set the name of the players so that the server and the clients are synchronized, I'm going to teach you about two different constructs that you need to implement. So the first thing is the sync vars. Now, I've already put this code into the setup local player through the magic of film editing. So if we go back into our setup local player file and have a look, you can see that the string pname player that was up the top, this bit here, now has this sync var above it in square brackets, and it's also been made public. Okay, so you need to add this as the first thing under setup local player. Now, what sync var does is it tells the server to sync this variable name out to all of the clients. Now, this is a one-way direction. So when pname is changed on the server side, it then gets pushed out to the clients. It doesn't work the other way. So this is that first direction of the message. Now, if we just go back for a second to where this code is attached to this free car, and we have a look down at this setup local player script, you can see that pname player, which is a default string, now has sync var after it. So it's going to be synchronized from the server side. Having this here doesn't really mean much. It doesn't do anything different. It just shows you in the inspector that it's a sync var. I guess it's for information for you later on. Let's go back to setup local player anyway. So now we can sync the player name as we had before with the onGUI, which was slightly different. It was just basically this line here that was constantly changing this P name over and over again. So you should have just this line. The problem with updating the player name every time you type in that text field is that in this method of sending the name around all of the players, it's going to slow the network down because it's sending out parts, not even the whole name, just the name as you type it letter by letter. It's sending it out through the network. So this is a lot of hits on the network just to change your name, which is very inefficient. So what I've done is to add this button after the name. And it's not until you click on the button that your name change will actually happen. So add this if GUI button in after your pname text field. Then inside it, we're going to call this function command change name and send it our pname variable. This command change name is a very special function. And this is the function that sends your name back to the server. Then the server can update this sync var, which will then send it out to all of the clients. So if we just make this window a little bit bigger so you can see that. So this is the start function that you had before down here. So we're doing all this above that start function. Here's our command change name function. And all it's doing is setting the value of pname to equal new name. Notice though, it's prefixed by this command in square brackets. This tells Unity that this function should be called on the server. And so our name goes from our client here. Here's the name string, whatever it is, Joe or Penny, comes in through here. It then sets this pname new name on the server, which updates this value here, which is a sync var. And because it's a sync var, it then tells the server to push out the new names to all of the clients. Okay, so sync var is in one direction from server to client, and command is in the other direction. It's from the client to the server. So we end up with this roundabout message system that's going on. Okay, so that's all of the text you need for this. Let's just look back down here and check that you've still got this the same. Chances are I probably changed this when I was updating the stuff above and didn't tell you about it and forgot. I don't think I have, but I'm just showing you in case I did change something so that you've got exactly the same code as I do. Okay, so now I'm going to save that. And we're going to build this out and create our other client. Now you'll be able to see the difference between the sync vars and the command thing actually working. So if I play this, I need to move this game screen across a bit. I don't think I can make it. Oh yes, I can make it bigger. Okay, good. Right. Put this down here. I'm going to run this and turn on the server. There's our little car. Just move it out of the road so that when the other player spawns in, we don't have a traffic accident. Right, there's our other player. Okay, so this here is a client connected to this server. So if we change this name down here to, say, Joe, notice that it updates in real time here, which is what we wanted, and that's as we programmed it. Then if I hit change, it changes it back on the server side. Now this is that command function pushing it this way. But notice what happens if I am on the server and I try and change my name. I might just have to make this Unity a little bit smaller so you can see. Because this is on the server and you're changing that sync var, look at what's happening over here. It's happening in real time because this is the server, and so therefore it has privileged access to that sync var, and as you're changing it on here, it pushes it directly out. So there's no real need for this change button, but it's there because it's on all of the clients. So now we have a way of changing our name. Now it's exactly the same process if you want to change your player's color or any other attributes, maybe their health setting if you're in a multi-player fighting game. You can do exactly the same thing through that same method using sync vars and the command functions to create that looping effect with the messages. So let's just go back here again once more to show you. Okay, this is the sync var. The messages get pushed out to the clients, and that's a one-way direction from the server. If you want to then send a message back from your client to the server, you use a command and you set your P name, or you set your sync vars this way, and so this then sets it on the server, which in turn pushes that out to all of the clients. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial, and I hope that helped you through the web, web or confusion of the networking, the Unity networking. It's very simple, and a lot of people will try and overcomplicate it by sending too many messages around. But I hope this simplifies the whole process for you. So good luck with your networking.